Hello, my name is Bonnie Kane Wood, and welcome to Tech Tuesday at 2 in the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios. Both this event and this space are designed to encourage students to experiment with some of the latest software and technology. Our mission with the Creative Studios is to make tools accessible to all OSU students and provide opportunity for students to develop a proficiency as well as a comfort level with the kinds of technology you will need to be successful at OSU and beyond. Tech Tuesday at 2 meets here in the Edmund Lowe Creative Studios on the first Tuesday of every month for interactive showcases of emerging and innovative technology. Last month, we learned about 3D modeling, and today we are going to learn some Photoshop basics. University Associate Director of Communications, Megan Horton, is going to present a hands-on demonstration and introduction to some of the software's most useful features. If you are watching on today's live stream, you can submit your questions via Twitter using the hashtag LibTech2s. Along the way, we're going to be drawing for some prizes, including today's grand prize, a Wacom tablet. If you're an OSU student, be sure to fill out a prize entry form. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you guys for coming today. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have used Photoshop before? Okay. How many of you have no exposure whatsoever to Photoshop? Awesome. We have indeed. Photoshop is one of my favorite pieces of software because it really, when you talk about possibilities of image composition and what you can create, there's really no limits to what you can accomplish. A lot of times it just depends on how much time you have to dedicate to what you're working on. So I'm going to start with several different hands-on topics, but one thing I want you guys to know is that on the computers that you're working on, there's a folder on the desktop with some tools that we're going to be using today. But first, I'll give you a little brief overview of Photoshop. The Adobe Creative Suite has a lot of different products that, depending on the type of task that you have, you want to use one over another. And Photoshop is definitely the tool that you want to use for image correction, graphic design in terms of creating flyers or promotional images, infographics. There's a lot of great tools that you can use. But I thought it'd be helpful for us to kind of talk through some basic photo editing first, and then we can get into some image composition and how you can combine some elements to make a compelling image through Photoshop. So to start today, you'll want to open the software, and if you click your Start button and go to Applications, and look for Adobe Photoshop Creative Cloud 2015. We're very fortunate that our IT group here on campus allows us to have this software through our software licenses. So if you don't have it on your personal devices, you can download it by going to it.okstate.edu and going to the software hub. There's a Mac version or a PC version. So does everybody have the software open? Great. There are several different tools and control panels here that I want to go over with you all. The left-hand side is your toolbar, and it has lots of different features here. So one of the tips that a lot of people don't know about Photoshop is when you're working within a document, how many of you have worked with layers before in Photoshop, just out of curiosity? So selecting an object within a layer can be difficult because you have to go back and forth to your layers to find it. But there is a kind of a trick. If you, under the File menu, click Auto Select, this will help us later on in our tutorial when we're working with multiple layers. But the first thing we want to do is figure out how do we create a new document or open a file, and that's through the File menu. So you want to go to File, Open, and if you navigate to your desktop in the Tech Tuesday, I think it's been Photoshop folder, we're going to start with the agriculture pick. So if you'll open that, and then one other thing I want you to do is go to File, New, and we're going to talk through how to create a document. So if you want to open a picture,
then you just file open like we did, and that defaults the image as the background layer, which helps you use some of the image correction features that we're going to go over. But if you want to create a new document, like I know I need to create a 5x7 postcard, this is where you would want to do it in your file, create new document. So there's several different color modes and resolution options here. If you click color mode, you'll notice there's bitmap, grayscale, RGB, CMYK, or lab color. I would recommend that if you're doing a web-based image, so if it's something that you're going to post on social media or through a website, that you would utilize the RGB color mode. Or if you have a print document, you would want to use the CMYK color mode. It's a 4-process color mode and allows for deeper saturation, deeper levels of color, and will give you a much better print quality. So we're actually going to be doing some imaging edits for web. So if you want to select RGB, and then I'm going to bump that up to a 32-bit color. This just increases the number of colors that can come through in your image. And then you can, in Photoshop, set your background color. And so I typically prefer to work off of a transparent background color. What this means is it's the background layer that's going to be underneath everything else will have no color or hue to it whatsoever. That way I can see which parts of my images are laying over different things, just how it looks without having any color. But if you know you want a baseline color for your document, you can select that by clicking the square to the right of the background contents, and that allows you to select a color. You can do that by moving your mouse through the different portions. So you can see, in this color scale to the right, it has an orange-red selected, and these are all the variations, hues and highlights and shadow colors based off of that. If I wanted to move up and choose something like more of a true OSU orange, you can see how scaling this impacts the colors that are available to you. So I'm going to go find kind of more of an OSU orange, or if you know the CMYK percentages or RGB, you can type those in. Or it allows you to type in a web color. So I know that OSU's web color is FF6600, and you can see that really brings up a true OSU orange. You can set the size. If you know the dimensions in inches, you can use that, but you'll notice with the drop down you can change to pixels, centimeters, millimeters, picas if you're working in a print document. I prefer inches, so I'm going to leave it at 5x7. So there are some advanced color profiles. We're not going to get into that today, but that is where you would edit that if you had certain print presets that you needed. And you can also go ahead and set your document name by setting it there. So we're going to click OK. So we have our new image here. If you'll jump back to agriculture, we're going to walk through some basic photo editing. So in the image panel at the very top, there are several different options. With Photoshop, you can go with some of the basic presets for image correction, or you can go as deep as dealing with the hue, saturation, the levels, the highlights. For the sake of today's talk, we're going to dabble a little bit in the presets, a few of some of the other options, but you can drill down, as much as you want to do it. And you would do that in the image panel. So let's start with going into the image adjustments, and we're going to talk about levels, curves, exposure. So let's open levels first. And for me, what's most helpful is just kind of dragging some of these tools to see what happens to the image. The example you have here is a screenshot from a video, and we want to kind of brighten it up, kind of let the colors be a little more richer. And there's lots of different ways to do that. But on the levels, if you see these little triangles here, this is where you can move things around to get various effects. So if you start with the midtones in the middle, as you see, I can drag this toolbar, and if I get too far to the to the shadow area, you can see it really brightens it up. Or if I move it too far to the right, it really deepens the image and increases the levels of the shadows. So if you're wanting, to enhance certain aspects of it, if it's too light or too dark, or you need to bump up your shadows, this is where you would do that. You can also move the triangles on the outer edges. So you can see when I move the shadow triangle in and kind of decrease the space of those three, it really deepens the shadows and the color. I'm actually not going to accept any of these changes. If you click OK, it will just make the change on your image. You can click cancel to exit out, or if you click auto, it will give you an auto adjustment on the levels. So let's cancel out. We're going to jump to another option here. If you go to image curves, this is one of my favorite photo correction tools within Photoshop, because it really helps to intensify the image, and if you're dealing with a pretty dark image, it really helps to brighten it up. And you can see this triangle line here. The bottom left-hand corner, as you can see through the gradation here, represents the shadows, and then the top right represents the highlight. You can click in any portion of this line to create a point. So I'm going to click in the middle, just a good rule of thumb to start in the middle here. And then you can see the grid. I'm going to create a point at each of these intersections with the line. And so whenever I hover over one of these points that I've created, if I move it up into a section, you can see it really changes the color landscape of the photo. So with this photo being a little dull and a little dark, I want to move this midline up and really bump up the highlights and the contrast on the photo. So you can see how much that enhanced the color. But you can see the light areas, some of the faces are starting to blend into the background, and the blonde individual's hairs is not standing out as much. So you want to be really careful to consider who's in the photo, what components are not working well together. And for this, I can tell the highlights are blending too much and there's too much intensity. So we'll try a few different things to see what we can do to change that. So we're going to try one of our other points, moving it up and down, just trying to find where that spot is. And you'll notice on the highlight, if you move it too far to the right and down, you get too dark of an image in some areas, and it dulls the photo with too much gray. So, and if we move the shadows down a little more, you can see how much brighter that green gets. So this is just kind of fun to play with, to find that balance to where you get a little more intensity in your photo, a little more color. And I'm going to bring this down just a bit because I still want that definition in this individual in the middle. Can you see the difference there? Okay, so I'm going to accept that change. We're going to do several different editing layers just to kind of see what it does. So you can tell a difference in the color. It's a little more green. So next we're going to go back to image adjustments. And you don't have to use all of these. Sometimes just using one does the trick, but just for sake of showing you all, we're going to do a few. The next one I want to show you is the vibrance. This one has a really simple tool here, but like if we want to increase the saturation to increase the amount of color that comes through, you can see how much more intense that green is. Or likewise, if we want to desaturate the photo to where it has less color, it's a little more dull, more of a vintage type look, then desaturating your photo would be a good technique for that. So I want to bump up the saturation, but not too much to where it looks like we're living in neon green grassland, right? Because it still needs to look natural. And on the vibrance, you can decrease the vibrance as well, or you can bump up. And you can tell, if you look at the oranges, you can really see when you move that toolbar how just, a few points difference takes it from a really dark red-orange to, more of a orange with lots of grays and light highlights in it. So I don't want it to get too intense, so I think I'm going to just do a few slight enhancements. So I'm decreasing the vibrance by -8 and increasing the saturation by 21. I'm going to keep that here. And the next thing I think our photo would need is a little more blue, because you can see our sky has gotten pretty dull. And basic color theory says that if you don't have enough of one color, then if you add the opposite color from the color wheel, they balance each other out. So the opposite color of blue is orange, and Photoshop allows you to do that through several different tools. So if we want to go to the channel mixer under the image adjustments, you can see you can do a lot of things with adjusting the channels here. And you'll see that the red is really dialed up here. If I drag this blue over, I can get a little more there. So you can do a lot of different things just by moving these and seeing what kind of color composition you want in your photo. Is everyone able to find these tools? Okay, we good? The other interesting thing that you can do is you can actually alter just a certain color channel on your photo. So if I want to alter the green channel and just add like some other color to just the green areas, then I would select the green and add those different areas, move the colors, and it only applies it to the items that are green in the photo. So I decrease the red and I increase the green and the blue, and you can see that that made the grass much more of a like brown, more wheat looking color. Has a lot more of a natural kind of neutral tone to it than what we had previously. And if you want to go back to see what your image looked like before the color correction, on the right-hand side of every Photoshop toolbar, it has the preview option. So if I uncheck this box, I can see the difference in the image to see if I like where it stands or if I want to go back to it. And I think the greens are a little too, so I'm just going to play with that. Okay. Now we've kind of played around with some of the things that you can really manipulate, but the other nice thing about Photoshop is it has some really great tools that simplify the process. So under the image menu item, there is auto tone, auto contrast, and auto color. And these are some auto corrections that if you just click them, you won't, to the naked eye, it's not a huge adjustment, but if there's any major color issues, Photoshop does recognize that and enhances the image. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is talk through what these icons on the left-hand toolbar mean. So we've been dealing a lot with the top item, which it looks like a cross point, but that is your selector tool. And if you hover over any of them, it will pop out the name of the tool that you're looking at as well. Then you have your selection tool, which has the dotted line. This is helpful if you're trying to select an area. You click and drag, and it will create a selection for you. And we're going to talk about that tool more in a minute. The lasso tool is like the selection tool, but it's a free-form tool. So I can drag the lasso tool anywhere, and it'll make the selection based on the shape of what I select. And if you want to deselect, you can press Control-D or deselect in your menu. And any tool on the left-hand side that has a triangle arrow in the bottom right-hand side, if you hold your mouse over, you can see that it has multiple tools within there. So like on the marquee tool or the selection tool, I can select a circle marquee and make an oval, or if you hold the shift down, you can actually get a uniform circle. So this is helpful in when you want to pull out a section of an image in that shape, and we'll walk through how to do that in a minute. Then you have your quick selection tool, a magic wand tool, a crop tool. So this is great if you just want to crop an image. If you select it, it will create a bounding box on your image. You can see I can drag in to the portion that I want. And then if you need a uniform size, like I know I want to crop a 5:7 image, excuse me, on the ratio drop down at the very top, you'll see that you can choose a ratio. So you can have a 1:1. So if you want a square, like an Instagram image or a social image that's in the square format, you would select that. There's 4:5, 5:7, 2:3, 16:9. So if you need something to go in a slide, that 16:9 crop is a great file size to use. I'm going to choose a 1:1 because I would want to put this on social media for my team. So I'm going to press the shift button down. That keeps it uniform. And then if you press enter, it should, accept the transformation. So you can see it crop my image down to the square size. So the next tool that we have is the eyedropper tool. This lets you select color sample any area of your photo. So if I want to see what color this orange is, I can select it. And you'll see that it makes it the front color on your color selector down in the bottom. Then we have our the healing brush, the smart healing brush, the patch tool, and honestly, this one I'm not really sure of. The paintbrush tool, the pencil tool. Bonnie, what is this one with the swirly arrows? I can't remember the name of it. It might come to me later. The stamp tool, the clone tool. This is great for cloning patterns. Your history brush tool, art history brush, eraser tool. So if we wanted to remove part of an image, we would select the eraser tool. And a little shortcut for you on your keyboard, the square brackets, the bracket that's open to the left will increase your brush size. You can see how it got much bigger. The bracket that's open to the right will decrease it. So it's just a great quick way to do that. You can also change the size and the features of your brush within the brush panel. So you can see this brush has it's like a real paintbrush. It has different filaments that would be on a paintbrush. And I obviously don't want to leave my image like that. So I'm going to go to Window, History. If you don't learn anything else today, this is really important. Your history panel within Photoshop will allow you to go back, because the undo or Control-Z only allows you to go one step back in Photoshop. So if you go open your history, we're going to go back to the crop, and you'll see it erased or undid all of my paintbrush tool. So then we have your gradient, your paint bucket, dodge and burn, your blur, smudge, all of these things down here. Type tool, which we'll get to in a minute. But if I want to zoom in on a portion of an image, I use the magnifying glass, and you can drag and get as close or as far away as you want. And we're going to walk through a couple other photo tips here, and then we're going to jump into composing an image. So if you'll zoom in on a photo, and then you can use your hand to drag and move it around, you'll see that these gentlemen's faces are a little darker than these females who are in the light. And one way to adjust that is through your dodge and burn tool. So your dodge tool will brighten what's there, and the burn tool will bump up the midtones. So we're going to actually use the dodge tool to brighten their faces a little bit. This is also great for brightening eyes. So if you have someone that has eyes that are a little dark in a photo, you can use that as well. I'm going to decrease my brush size so that I don't get the other portion around this gentleman's face. But if you get a brush size that's, allows you to go to different sections of it without going to the outside of it, and you're just going to click into the area, and you can see it really, it keeps the features of his face, but allows you to brighten it up. So if I go back to view, fit on screen, you can see how much brighter his face is compared to the gentleman to the left of him. Now we're going to do, I'm not going to zoom in as close this time, but you can do that on the gentleman to the right of him, and see if you just use that burn tool and just kind of click in there, you get a little more of the sunlight on their faces, but it keeps the integrity of their face in the image. And I'm going to do it on this lady in the sunglasses as well, because it looks like she's got some shadows here that I'd want to get rid of. You can just see how now we can see her smile a little better. Now this photo isn't that large, so it's hard to tell a huge difference, but if you're color correcting someone's portrait, this is a great tool to use. Now one keyboard trick that's great to use is Control-0, and if you've zoomed in on part of the image, that will bring it all back to within your frame of view. And we're going to use the burn tool to burn the edges a little bit. So if we want to create a little bit of a vignette, did I say that right? This tool is a great way to do that. And I'm going to increase the size of my brush again by clicking that the open to the left bracket on my keyboard. And I'm just going to kind of color the edges of the photo a little bit. You'll see it kind of darkens it. The sky is a little harder to tell, but once we get down here, you can see it really deepens the color profile a little bit. It blurs it a little bit and puts a little bit more of a focus on the individuals in the photo. And I did more than I probably would, like if I were editing for it to look natural, like a natural blur. But that tool is a great tool to use for that type of a feature. Any questions on those items so far for color correcting photos? Okay. We're going to open another image because I want to show you some other tools. So if you go to File, Open, and we're going to open Spring Campus. Who wouldn't love this picture of Edmund Lowe? Just so beautiful, right? Beautiful spring day. And we're going to start by, again, I'm going to kind of bump up the curves a little bit just to give this photo a little more intensity. And this time I'm going to drag it down. You can see the difference. If I bring it up too much, it makes it real light. But if I bring this line down a little bit, you can see those blues got a lot deeper. The grass got a lot greener, but it still looks really natural. So I'm going to go with that. If I wanted to use the burn tool to, edit those edges again, I could, come in, and you can see how just, if I do this on the corners, it just kind of gives it a little bit of a little deeper effect there. Now, I'm going to show you how to kind of edit the document size once you've opened it or created your image, and if you want to adjust that a little bit. There's a difference between image size and the document size or canvas size. So if you click the image, I'm sorry, where am I at? Okay, if you click image and go to image size, this is the actual size of the image that you're working with. So this is a very large photo. But if I want to change the actual size of the document, let's say I want to make it bigger so that I can have room for another design element, I would go to canvas size. And if I want to increase it from the top, I would click this top arrow, the bottom arrow, and then I would increase the height to, let's say, 14 inches. And you can see it increased my document size, but it did not manipulate my image size. And it has the default background color, which is white. So if you wanted a simple, photo edit to where you just have a photo with some text above it, that's a great way to do it. You can also add some layers on top, which we'll get into, but just wanted you to see how to be able to manipulate that document size. So I'm going to crop this back, and I'm going to go back to ratio so that I don't keep that square. And we're going to do some fun editing with Pistol Pete. Does everybody love Pistol Pete? Because I do. Okay, I'm having some issues here. Okay. We're just going to go back here. Okay. So if you'll go to File, Open, Alumni Pete. We're going to use the Quick Selection tool. This is one of my personal favorites. And it is in the top left. It's the fourth one down. And it looks like a paintbrush with a little dotted circle around it. So this tool, just like the paintbrushes, you can increase the size with the brackets or with the drop down. And we're going to get it to where it's about the size of a little bigger than Pete's eye. And I'm going to click into the area that I want to crop out of this photo. So we're going to crop Pete out of this photo. This also works if you don't have a white background. It does make it easier the more contrast there is between the object you're trying to pull out and the background. So if you click into Pete's hat, you can see how it's starting to quick select the orange. So I'm just going to keep clicking around in him to where I'm getting all the pieces of this that I need. Being careful not to put the X or the plus sign in the middle of the selector tool on the background, because that will make that part of your selection. If you do, that's okay. You can press the Control button. Sorry, is it the Alt button? Sorry, I'm on a Mac, so my defaults are a little different. If you press the Alt button while you have this tool, you'll notice it changes to a minus sign. That's how you can deselect something that you've accidentally selected. So you don't have to start all over. And I've got a great example of this here. You can see there's not a lot of contrast between Pete's hand and the poster board. So I'm going to press Alt, and I'm going to click, go back to my tool here. And I'm going to decrease the size of my brush a little bit, just to get a little more detail here. And I'm just going to drag around his fingers and tighten that up a little bit. And you see how it auto corrects and kind of smooths out the edges of what you select, which is great. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to get too detailed here, but it's a lot faster than trying to drag a selector around him and do it by hand. So if you'll just go all the way around, we're going to get every part of him, his boots, his chaps, his legs. Okay, I think we've got everything. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can move him into another image. So we're going to put him on library lawn today. So you can do a couple different things. You can edit, copy, and this copies your selection. And then if you click the window that's open and edit, paste, it'll put Pete in a new layer in your document. And layers are how you put multiple things together. So just one on top of the other. So if you look to the bottom right, there's a layers panel, and the way these are ordered are the way they're presented in the image. So if I moved Pete theoretically behind the background, which I can't because it's locked, but let's say we had another image. Well, how about this? If you click the icon next to the trash can, that creates a new layer. Let's give Pete a twin, and we'll press Control V, and we'll paste in another one. We'll move him to the left. So if I thought I want Pete's twin in layer number 2 to be in front of layer number 1, I'm sorry, layer 1 to be in front of layer 2, I just click it, drag it down, and you can see that his poster board went in front of the other Pete because he's now in front. Now, because we don't want the public to know we have 2 Petes, we're gonna get rid of this other Pete. So I'm gonna click this layer, and you can remove any layer by dragging it into the trash can, just like on the trash can on your desktop. So now we have one great Pete. And Pete's a little big for our picture, but depending on your composition, you can do a lot of different things. If you like it bigger, that's fine. But I want to make it look like he's standing on the grass a little bit.
Could you show us how did you cut and paste it here?
Yes. So after you have your selection, if you go to Edit, Copy, and you can do Control-C just like in Microsoft or Excel. And then when you're in the document that you want to paste it in, if you press Control-V or Edit Paste, it'll paste it in there. And I'll show you another trick that I really like. If you click the document that you want to pull the image off of, if I see how I can click on this, the name of the title of the document, and pull it down, it pops out a window. So the other thing you can do is you can take your 4-arrow tool and click into Pete, and I can drag him over.
Yeah, and during the selection, if I selected something by mistake and I want to select it again.
Oh, to remove it from the selection? Okay. If you want to remove, like, for example, we don't want his hat up here or something. Let me zoom in a little bit. You would have the selection tool selected, and it's the 4th one down, and press the Alt tool, and you see how it changes to a minus sign? Then I would click into the area that is selected, and you can see it starts to, see this line as it comes down? It's removing that from the image, and it goes off of the colors sections. So like it is kind of taking the things that are most similar in the area to it. And if you want to add that back in, when you're not holding Alt, the plus sign is there, and I can click and drag and move this over to create the selection. Is that helpful?
Yeah, so in order to delete it, you click the Alt button?
To delete it, yes, Alt, and then you click after you. So you can see the circle in the middle. That is actually not part of the selection now. So if I edit, copy that, you can see the difference. Where did he go? There he is. You can see the hole in his hat. So that's not part of the selection. Pete got in a gun brawl in the alley. Sorry, we do not endorse gun brawls, but he is a cowboy. He knows how to protect these parts. Okay, so now if we want to resize Pete, we would go to Edit, Transform, and there's lots of different transform options here. So if I want to transform and I want to flip him completely, I can flip him vertically and upside down. I can edit, transform, and I want to flip him the other way to where his hand is on the other side. I could flip horizontal, and his sign can be on the other side. I don't recommend doing this if someone's wearing any lettering on their shirt, or if there's something distinct about them that type of edit makes it not look like themselves. But if there's something that it's somewhat similar, you just need to reposition it, that works well. But we want to change his size, so we're going to Edit, Transform, Scale. And you'll see that you get this box around the image. If you hold down the Shift key, when you change the scale of any image, it will retain the integrity of what you're doing. So we're just going to bring him down. I don't want to get him too small, but small enough that he's fitting in really well. Now, you can add some image formatting to the layers as well. So if you double click the image, you'll get a layer style panel. And this is where you can add some things to Pete. So if I want to add a drop shadow behind Pete to create some depth, I would click the square next to that item, and then you can select it and edit the options. I think it helps it. Okay. I'm going to move Pete to the other side to make it a little easier to see here. Okay, so we've got a drop shadow here, and there's lots of different options. Don't let these intimidate you, because you can undo anything. But if I want to increase the size of the drop shadow, I can just click this over to the right. The spread is how far it spreads out. The distance is how far it is from Pete. And the opacity is it transparent or is it solid? So if I go to 100% opacity, you'll see how dark and black that is. We want it to look a little more natural than that. So I'm going to set it to about a 40% transparency. And you can change the angle, so if I want the sun to come from one side or so that the shadow's on the other side, you can do that. And we'll press OK. And there are other options, so you can add a stroke. If you click stroke, like if I want a white border around Pete, I can do that here, and I can change that to like 10 pixels. You can see when I drag this, it just gets more and more defined. Again, some of these things I'm showing you aren't recommended just for the best composition of graphic images, but if you need to add a stroke to something, this is where you would do it. You can add lots of different items. Inner shadow, I would just encourage you to work with these and kind of see what you like. If you decide you want to turn it off later or just kind of see what it looks like, you can click the eyeball on any of these things and it will remove it from view until you want to see it. And also while you get photo editing, if you don't want to see Pete until you're ready for him, you can click the eyeball and that will remove him from view as well. Okay, so let's talk about adding some text into our image. The T is your text tool, so if you'll select it, and you can add text a couple different ways, just by clicking into the space, and it'll allow you to type. I like to create text boxes so that I can keep it within a frame, so just click and drag. And we're going to create a holiday card. That's what I'm going for today. So I'm going to type "Wish You Were Here." And we're going to open up the Type Tool Editor. It is the little file folder looking icon at the very top on the far right next to the symbol that looks like a circle with a line across through it. If you click that, it'll open up all your text editing options just like if you were in Word. And you can select any typeface that you'd like. I'm going to go with a bold font like Impact, or we're going to go with Gill Sans today. And you can increase the type size. Make sure you select your tool. Have all your text selected when you're changing the font face too. So you can just play around with your text. You can adjust the leading by clicking where it says Auto. Kerning, you can change it to all caps by clicking the two capital T's. You can see it changed the formatting of that. And if I want to bring this on two different lines and make it center aligned, I can click over to Paragraph and adjust it to make it a center aligned text document. I can see we've got some text where we want it, but now we need to make sure it looks good with the image. So we're going to go back to our transformation tool, Edit, Transform, and we're going to rotate it to where it matches the sign that we're using here. And this allows you to just move things and rotate in the space. And if you press enter, it will accept your transformation. So, there's a lot of different things. You can add layers. Like if I wanted to create another color block, I typically do that by using the marquee tool. So like if I wanted to create some color blocking over here that I can add a design or some text, if I select it and create a new layer, and then go over to the paint bucket tool, which is different in this one than mine. There we go. There's lots of other tools nested in that very bottom item, so we're going to select the paint bucket tool. And you can see I can just add some color there if I wanted something like that in my image. Okay, we've covered a lot. Any questions so far? Yes. The paint bucket tool is nested in the very bottom. So right above the color panel, if you hold down that arrow, there's about 15 tools that are in there. And it's midway in that toolbar. Okay, so we've kind of talked through layers and editing. You can also do some really neat things by layering some color in with your images. So I'm going to create a new layer above the background image. And I'm going to use the paint bucket tool to create I'm going to say a kind of a taupey brown color. So you can see if I colored that and made it a solid background. When I have this layer selected, in the drop-down menu that says normal next to opacity, there's several different blending options that you can choose from that will blend this layer with the background that's behind it. So if I want to, for example, select lighten, you can see how it kind of keeps some of that coloration, but it brings in some of the photo in the background. I can decrease the opacity of that layer to where it's not as intense. You just get some of that hue without the full image. Some people really like distorted, full saturation kind of backgrounds for like band posters or flyers. So this is a good area to do that. If I go to hue, you can see it really took the tones down to the colors, predominantly what was in that layer. Saturation kind of pull some of that. So if you just click these, there's so many different things you can do depending on the color that you choose, like hard mix. I mean, that gives you some major saturation texture with your photo. And if well, it doesn't look good with Pete or our text, if you took something like that, bumped down the opacity a little bit, you could work with different types of compositions. So the last thing I wanted to cover with you, we kind of talked through how to, yes?
So why the effects of the last layer didn't affect on Pete?
No, it did not affect Pete.
Yeah, why?
Because it's only applied to the layer, that color layer we created. So I'm going to go back. So that's hard mix that I chose. If I go to normal, you can see it's the brown. The wonderful thing about Photoshop is when you're working within layers, if you apply a transformation to that layer, it's only to that. It's not to the other elements in the composition. So whenever I select that and choose that blending mode, it only does it to that layer, and so it allows other components to not be manipulated. Okay. So we walked through how to do some really cool color correction things through Photoshop's tools, but there are a lot of free tools out there that you can download that are great shortcuts. And so I've included some on your desktop. I'm going to show you how to do them, but first I want you to open the other image that's in your folder, the Fall Campus image, because we are all ready for fall, right? Ready for 60 degrees, 50 degrees. I'd take 10 degrees less than where we are today. Can we just get 10? Just knock it down 10. It's November 1st. So with this image open, we're going to delve into actions. And actions are really fun because it takes all those little, saturation, color, hue, but it takes the hard work out of it. It pulls them together and then kind of allows you to take someone else's actions and put them on your photo. So on the right-hand side, next to your histogram is a side toolbar, and there's a play button. This is your actions. And I'm going to show you how to load an action set. So if you click the lines to the right, we're going to say load actions, which is midway in your panel. And in the desktop on the folder, there are two. There's PW Action Set 1, PW Action Set 2. If you'll select Set 2 and load, you can load both of them, but for the sake of time, we're just going to use one. And what this does is it takes the photo that you have and gives different highly designed kind of photo filters. So these are, full disclosure, the Pioneer Woman's action sets. So if you follow her blog, this is some that she created. But I really like some of the photo editing that she's done, so that's where I got them. But if you click the arrow, the drop-down arrow, you can see there's about 10 actions in Action Set 2. So if I want to change this to a sepia tone image, I would select the sepia tone item within the actions and click the triangle play button in the bottom part of this panel. And you can see how it went ahead and automatically did it for me. I didn't have to go to the edit image folder. It just created a nice sepia tone image for me. You can also see that it created a layer above your background layer. So if I wanted to decrease the opacity so that still some of the color came through, if I take this down to 60%, you can see it kind of dulls the image, still has a hint of sepia tone, but lets that color come through. So I'm going to click the eye because I don't want to see that, and we're going to try some of these other actions. So if you click, let's see, let's do 70s. We'll go back to the 70s. You can see that just kind of bumped up the intensity of the photo a little bit in the foreground, kind of gave it a little ethereal quality. And let's try Heartland. And some of these are multiple steps. You can see it's like a play button, and it walks through those steps and kind of takes a minute. So you can see it nests those layers into folders. So if I click this down, these are all the steps that it went through to get this look and feel. So if I want to bring Pete into this image, see, now we have some nice color contrast. We've got kind of that grayscale, high contrast image in the background with some color in the foreground. So I would just encourage you to play around with actions. They're a lot of fun, and you can get a lot of different photo effects without having to learn all the different steps to get to it. It takes the thinking out of it, and you can get some really nice effects from it. Okay. How are we on time? We're good? Okay. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap it up today is the alignment of items and how you can kind of use this top toolbar. So you can see these lines and squares. This is how you align things. One thing I'm really picky about is, if you've got text boxes, several text boxes, you want to make sure that if they're left aligned, that they're all kind of on that same line, so that it doesn't look like they're all over the place. So we're gonna, I'm gonna create a few boxes here. So we're gonna say Oklahoma State University. I'm going to create a few duplicate layers, and you would do that by just clicking your layer and dragging it into the new layer tool, and it'll create several of the same for you. So I'm just going to move these around. And this is where that auto select tool comes in really handy, because you don't have to click the layer to select the item. Like if I want to click Pete and move him, I can just click him. If I want to click the text and move it, I can move it down because I created 4 of these. I can see this is not very comforting on the eye because they're all over the place. But if I select these 4 layers, you can see these square and line diagrams brightened up, and that allows me to adjust the alignment. So if I click this one with the squares with the line on the left-hand side, you can see it brings them all over and aligns them. And if I want them to be equidistant apart horizontally, then I can select one of these and align them to the top horizontally and make them equidistant apart. So there's numerous options, countless options in Photoshop that you can take layers and text elements and photo editing to create a really compelling image. I would just encourage you to keep trying. Don't be discouraged. Remember that your history panel is there. You can always jump back to where you were, and always remember to save your image and your progress.